Good evening, everyone. Tonight is a South Kingstown Planning Board work session. The date is Tuesday, March 11, 2025. The time is 6:34. The first item on our agenda is roll call. Susan Axelrod.
Here.
Joe Murphy. Here. Peter DiStefano. Here. Robin Pothier. Here. Liz Karp. Here. Caper Wilson. Here. And Maria Mack is here. Our next agenda item is a minor land development preliminary plan with Unified Development Review, 349 Main Street. We have a staff memo along with a draft motion, which was discussed at our last regular meeting. Jamie, anything new from your end of things?
Just no, Madam Chair, you asked us to formalize the motion, review it. We have two conditions that we are recommending in our draft motion. So we're available for questions if anyone has anything.
Questions from anyone?
Sure. So I feel like one of the most important things we talked about last time was the parking issue, which isn't mentioned at all in the draft motion. That concerns me. And I also really wanted to ask as well, how long can a person stay at the hotel? What kind of time limit is there? Could it be used as a residence, I guess?
So, Madam Chair, with regards to parking, that was addressed by the applicant and staff at the last meeting as it relates to the regulations. The applicant is asking for a waiver associated with the number of spaces on site, given the fact that there is available municipal parking and that their proposed use would in fact be less than the existing use as a furniture store under the town zoning code. As it relates to the length of stay, there is no particular limitation contained in the regulations associated with hotels, but it cannot turn into a permanent residential facility. So again, there wouldn't be anything from anyone who was a professor at URI who wanted to pay a daily rate and stay there for 3 months during a semester. It is a hotel, but it's not intended to be a year-round residence.
So I believe at the last meeting, there was some mention about parking next to or adjacent to the Muse parking lot, and we had decided that, well, I know some people in the room don't live in town and don't try to use the municipal lot or unload a car with 3 kids in a stroller, but parking over there doesn't seem very available. And so, you know, the TRC's recommendation that we address the issue of what if the, I don't really like the way it's worded, what if the municipal lot's not available? That makes it sound like the hotel could be using the lot. But I think what it's intended is for your valet setup. But how are you going to deal with that in the event that you can't get in the lot? That's another valet.
Madam Chair, if staff can address that. What happens to every
Yes.
business in downtown if the municipal lot isn't available? What does the 2 restaurants immediately left and right of the hotel do? What does everybody do if that municipal lot isn't available? It is not structured to an individual business in town, nor is any of the parking on Main Street. It is open for use for the general public. The zoning regulations allow the applicant to seek a waiver request, and in their testimony, they prove to the town from a zoning requirement their proposed new use is less than the required amount of parking for the furniture store.
Yeah,
So
and we keep mentioning that, and that's one thing, and I guess if you want to be a furniture store, we'll address all that as well. But, right, all right, so it's not really worth talking about because we need to talk about what the real situation is. And so if the municipal lot's not available and I wanted to go to a store, then clearly I have to go find somewhere else to park. But they have what sounds like a strict protocol where their visitors, their guests, would come to your 5 available lots and then transfer their vehicle, and your valet parker would Right, so that was supposed to be addressed and it hasn't. I'm just reading black and white off the paper here.
Madam Chair, again, based on testimony received during the application process, the applicant testified that he owns multiple properties within the Main Street corridor, and their intent is to valet from the hotel to other properties that they own, that they did the analysis on, that from a zoning perspective are adequately parked for the use under the zoning code, and in fact have additional parking spaces beyond what is required under the zoning code, specifically with the analysis of the Muse and the requirements for parking for the restaurant with a 50% reduction, that there are additional spaces available beyond the regulatory requirement for the restaurant.
And he was also equally clear that this was the intent as long as he owned the property, but it certainly doesn't run with the land. So there's absolutely no indication that there's going to be alternate parking. I just want to be clear about
Yep,
that point.
you're
I don't
right.
have an opinion. I don't have an opinion on that yet.
Andy?
No.
Okay. Other thoughts?
I,
Joe? And then Caper.
As concerned as I am about parking, on condition 2, which limits it to the coffee area to hotel guests only, I would not object to open that up to the public. Truthfully, I can't imagine people driving down the road and pulling in there to go get coffee. If I'm in my car, I'm gonna go to Dunkin' Donuts or Starbucks. So having that so that could also serve somebody that's walking by or somebody that works in a neighboring building, I would have no objection to.
Caper?
personally, I love the proposal. I think it's a great design, and I think I like the way it keeps the facade that we have downtown, and I like the way it attracts new business. But my concern has to do with the required findings that we need to make, and whether we actually have the evidence in the record to make those findings. And so I'm looking to outside counsel to assure us that there is an adequate record to support that. And specifically, I do have a couple of questions. The applicant, and I'm sorry, but maybe I'm having trouble reading the documents, but I'm not clear on who the applicant is. Is it an individual? Because the requirement is we have to say that the hardship for which we're seeking a variance is not the result of any prior action of the applicant. And I don't know if that means the current individual, if there's a corporation, or if there's a family who owned the business. I mean, clearly, the department store was built a number of years ago. It's non-conforming already, and the hardship that's there is the result of the prior builders, it would seem to me. So I'm just not sure that all of these required findings, some of which are very strict,
Andy?
you know, so I'm looking for our counsel to let us know if
Yes.
there is adequate evidence in the record to make the findings that we're being asked to make.
I wasn't here last month, but I did talk to Peter about this today, and I reviewed the report and recommended decision, and I think there is. The hardship goes to the property. It's not anything to do with the individual. And the fact is, when the building was built, there were no parking requirements in zoning. So it's not that they did anything, that it's a self-created hardship. What that's referring to is kind of the idea that someone would, if they had a parking lot that was attached to it and sold off the parking lot separately or something like that, that would be that kind of self-created hardship. But no, this is a hardship that results from the character of the land. It's in a downtown area where no one had parking, there weren't the parking requirements, the common thing. And frankly, it's also what our comprehensive plan calls for. We're trying to minimize the, number of parking spaces and pavement, so forth. We're trying to do that, not maximize it in our downtown. And as to, I think the question is, what will happen if, this is a hotel, if they don't provide adequate parking, it will be a short time before the reviews start coming up. Nice place to stay, but there's no place to park, and their business will suffer. They're going to have the requirement as a business model to provide that parking because of the nature of the business. And if not, they'll suffer, and then something else will be coming in and changing from that to a different use. So I think the parking is adequately dealt with. That is up to you in the end. My understanding was that this was a decision to accept it the way it was and not require a specific deeded parking requirement, since it's downtown and there's a lot of different lots available. Whether they're owned by the same individual now or in the future doesn't necessarily matter, is because of the downtown nature. And the idea is these people are not going to be taking up parking spaces when they walk from the hotel to the other businesses on Main Street. They're not going to be taking up parking spaces when they're patronizing those businesses.
My questions aren't strictly restricted to parking. If you look at page 5, the findings of fact, C, says that the granting of the requested variance will not alter the general character of the surrounding area or impair the intent or purpose of the zoning ordinance or the comprehensive plan upon which the ordinance is based. Well, my personal view is that creating a hotel will improve the general character of the surrounding area. It will revitalize the area. And this is a very positive thing, and I'm all in favor of it. But I'm concerned about the language of the finding, because I have trouble seeing, since I think it will significantly improve the character, how can I think that it will not alter? So I'm struggling with how am I honestly going to say that I can make this finding a fact?
I think that finding is a reference that it won't alter the general character in a negative way. That's certainly the way that we usually interpret
Yes,
these.
absolutely. I don't think there's anything wrong with it altering it in a positive way.
Exactly. Yep. Susan?
Well, we all do. Remember, they were written by a committee and staffed by, ledge council and compromise, and that's. And some of this language goes back to Herbert Hoover and his model ordinances, which went out across the country in the 1920s. So, okay. But, so you have to take it the way it is, and I think you can confidently accept my recommendation that a positive altering of the general character is not something that you have to worry about as a finding. In fact, it just supports the finding that this will not negatively alter the character of the area.
Susan?
I think this project's fabulous for this town, so let me start off by saying that. I'm really excited about this project. You sent us 2 different architectural renderings, one that we received before the meeting, one we received at the meeting. This motion refers to the architectural renderings submitted to the planning board at that meeting. And I think that for future reference, for future boards, for future reviewing of this project, you would have to then go back and, I don't know, how to read the minds of which plans we gave. Can we make this more tight to exactly which plans we're talking about. It was cedar shakes and retaining the copper edging, as opposed to which,
Generally, it's
I
it's the
think I
date
can
of
address
the
that.
revision.
If you look at our file and the way that information's received, the architectural renderings that were received that are in the file are dated February 25th,
Right.
2025. So there's a previous set, and this refers strictly to that set that was received and dated February 25th, 2025.
okay, thank you, because the ones that I have don't have any dates on them.
Correct.
Okay,
We
thanks.
stamped them received.
Okay, so there's no question that we're talking
I have
cedar shakes, copper edging.
no issues with that.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments?
I did have one more reservation, if I may. And I apologize, I didn't mark it well enough for me to find it right now, but I thought that in reading through the draft motion, there were some open items that we just didn't have submissions yet. And I just wanted to make sure that we're comfortable that we can make the motion and approve the motion with the current status. We're not waiting for any material before we vote on this. If you need me to find it, I can.
So in preparing the draft motion in the last 2 weeks, we undertook a review of the file. I've actually listened to the meeting over again to make sure that things that potentially would be open are closed, and crafted the motion to close anything that could be perceived as open. With regards to their waiver request was specific to a reduction of the number of spaces required for the hotel guests. It didn't address the spaces that would be needed if a public restaurant was there. Therefore, the language is simply that what they labeled as restaurant space is in essence an extended lobby space open to the hotel guests, which clarifies and supports their waiver request for only the hotel parking associated with the rooms. It doesn't mean that a landowner, applicant, or operator can't come back to you and ask for an amendment to a previously approved plan to open that space to the general public. They would just have to modify a waiver request associated with the spaces for that square footage. In addition, we added language associated with the actual functionality of converting this space from a furniture store to a hotel. There's a significant amount of construction that will need to be undertaken, and we require them to do a demolition and construction sequencing plan so we understand how their laydown areas are going to work, how new material and demo material will leave and enter the site. So that, again, they can't just show up on a Monday morning and drop a dumpster in the municipal lot or on Main Street. That all that is vetted through the appropriate staff, and they get their appropriate approvals through that vetted process. And again, clarifying which architectural plans were the plans of record, which were the February 25th, 2025 set, which showed in essence maintaining the copper cladding, the cedar shakes, and that architectural vernacular.
In addition, there's a statement in here that the project has not yet been certified complete at this time, which I understand, and as such, an associated decision deadline has not been established, and that's not problematic for the standpoint of this motion, I think.
Correct.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jamie. I think that the correction in language is very helpful, where the language function as an amenity to overnight hotel guests staying at the hotel, because it's not like they're opening up a bistro or a restaurant. And yes, we did have quite a bit of discussion relative to parking, but as Andy stated, it's up to the hotel to ensure that they have the ability to park their patrons, and it's a shared parking lot. And I think this is an excellent project which will help to further revitalize our Main Street area. Is there anyone else who has any comments or changes to the motion? Hearing none, would someone?
I'll make that motion. The South Kingstown Planning Board hereby grants preliminary plan approval for 349 Main Street minor land development application with Unified Development Review to renovate the existing structure and convert to a hotel with 20 guest rooms and a first-floor amenity area for the property located at 349 Main Street, Assessors Plat 56-3, Lot 48, J2 Properties, applicant John L. Sheldon III, owner. The approval is based upon the application materials of record included but not limited to the plan titled Dimensional Conformance Survey, Assessors Plat 56-3.
You don't have to read the whole thing. You can just reference the draft decision.
Okay. Let me go through this and then I'm two-thirds through it now. All right. So conformance survey, Assessors Plat 56-3, Lot 48, 394 Main Street, South Kingstown, Rhode Island, scale 1 inch equals 10 feet, dated July 16th, 2024, revision date November 7th, 2024, prepared by Gatsby Companies, 33 Main Street, Suite 200, East Greenwich, Rhode Island, 02818. The approval is also based on a schematic block plan for the Sheldon, Wakefield, 349 Main Street, South Kingstown, Rhode Island, sheet EX 1.1, dated September 24th, 2024, completed by Jeff Cammons, completed by McGeorge Architect Interiors, 18 Fifth Avenue, East Greenwich, Rhode Island, 02818, along with the architectural renderings submitted to the planning board on February 25th, 2025, prepared by McGeorge. This approval is based on findings of fact A through D, findings of fact land development E through I, conditions of approval 1 through 3.
Thanks, Joe. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Thanks to the advice of counsel, I'm happy to second the motion.
We have a second from Caper. Is there further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. I looked at everyone's. Any nays? Motion carries. Good luck, folks. Our next agenda item is a major land development pre-application meeting and request to combine conceptual master plan and preliminary plan stages of review, South Kingstown High School. This is a pre-application, so board members and those in the public will know that this is an initial stage. It is an area in which we can share information, ask questions, and get a general sense of the project. Is there anyone representing the applicant?
Good evening, everyone. My name is Philip Conte. I am an architect with Studio Jade. The Studio Jade team is the managing architect for the new South Kingstown High School project. With me here this evening is Sam Hemingway with Garofalo, our site civil engineer, Terrence Connolly with Left Field, the owner's project manager. So I will briefly just give you a little background on the project. This is my first time ever presenting a pre-application in South Kingstown, so excuse my ignorance, and Sam will certainly guide us through the technical part. But the existing South Kingstown High School is about 260,000 square feet, once served up to almost 1,400 students. We have gone through the RIDE school building construction process for a new high school of about 153,000 square feet for 725 students on the same parcel, which involves a land swap between Hazard Field and where the existing high school is now. This is a site plan that we have conceptually developed that certainly Sam can speak to if there are any technical questions. I think some features to highlight is that the front of the school faces School Street. We have vehicular and pedestrian access on both the front and the back, but the school really doesn't have a back because the backside of the school faces the open fields that are currently occupied by the existing school. Sam, do you have anything to add?
Sure, no, I think.
Okay. All right.
Answer questions.
I'm happy to answer questions.
Perhaps we should hear from your engineer first?
Sure.
And then move forward with questions.
Sure, I thought that was a pretty thorough outline of where we are right now. We have obviously done a lot of work on the building and the site development characteristics, but this pre-application stage is one really to present the findings of that initial study. The property is about 5 acres, but the three major components that make up the school, the field in total, the school itself, and as it relates to the existing building, there's the hazard building, which is on the property, and then the parking or support components that will support the building and the students, and frankly, the field as well. Those three areas are all going to be basically be maintained, just shuffled around. We have done some early investigations and pricing work to get to where we are right now. We obviously are cognizant of the rules and regulations as it relates to land development, both related to the regulations associated with this board, but also the utility provisions, the land development provisions of RIPDs and the stormwater management. We have initiated discussions with town departments on several occasions, including utility investigations, discussions on the circulation, both internal to the school, but also on the fronting streets, the operations of the high school. All of that information is obviously incorporated into the design that's in front of you. I'm hopeful that these discussions can be one of identifying issues that this board might consider to be significant and worthy of focusing on as we move forward with the hard engineering of this project. We have obviously a long ways to go. We have requested that the subsequent stages of this process be combined. I think it's both an opportunity in terms of schedule, but also a hazard of getting very far into the project at our next step. So we would love to hear things that you think ought to be focused. We are happy to incorporate them. We're obviously will be working to meet the regulations. There's no question about that. But we also want to develop a project that both this board and the town in general is happy with and meets the needs, the obvious needs for the town.
Thank you. Who would like to start with questions? Liz?
I think it's a very exciting project. I'm happy to see it going forward. I do have one question in order to just understand some of the conceptual thinking. Why was the school rotated so that the entrance is now on School Street instead of on Columbia?
Sure. So we have had the opportunity to work with South Kingstown for a number of years now, going through the entire RIDE construction process. And that involved a number of community sessions and forums over the years. And when we were determining where the new high school was going to go, there was a lot of discussion and public comment on locating the high school on this particular site and reorienting it to School Street. The size of the building It is a three-story building on one side and then larger volume spaces on the other. It's important to recognize that the existing school will remain in operation as we're building this new school. So the parameters were set pretty strict on the location of where the building could go, recognizing Hazard Building is also going to stay. It really developed, that really forced the plan, and it worked out well that we could orient the entrance back to School Street.
That's helpful, thank you.
Joe?
Have you, up to this point, or do you plan on having a meeting or design charrette with the immediate abutting neighbors for concerns of, since you're relocating the school, light, traffic, pedestrian pass-throughs where people take shortcuts, traffic of buses, vegetation buffers, schedules, but with the immediate neighbors? It would be good if that was part of the design process, so that we don't, or the town council doesn't hear all that when you kind of weigh into the project.
Sure, excellent point. So over the number of years, we have had direct dialogue with all of the abutters. They have been invited and active participants in our discussions of the site planning and the approach that we have been developing. We do have, as a part of the process, a school building construction meeting almost every 2 weeks that includes members of the town, the school department, and the community. So certainly there has been community input at those meetings as well. We are currently finalizing some additional conceptual renderings of the other side of the building. And as I said, this is our most recent site plan. So I would anticipate there would be another public presentation when we have finalized on the aesthetics of the building and the site plan.
I mean, the public presentations are great, and I'm sure you're going to get a lot of good input. I think it would be worthwhile, personally, I think it would be worthwhile to reach out specifically to the abutting neighbors, make them feel like part of the process, an invitation to them versus them finding out from another neighbor that it's going on, having them feel like they're part of the process, because when it eventually comes in front of the planning board or the town council, it's going to be those immediate neighbors that we're going to hear from. Like I said, it would be nice if they come, when they do come, they say, thank you, we already worked this out, and we're for this project because they took in consideration our concerns. It makes it a lot easier for everybody involved.
Sure. I will give you one example of when we've already done that. Is several months ago we conducted some drilling out in the field for a geothermal test well, and we went to each individual house with an invitation, with an explanation of what we were doing. So we have that direct contact, and we certainly can follow up on that as we go forward, yes.
And I'd like to agree with Joe's comments, particularly if the project changes as you move forward, which inevitably it will. So keeping those folks in the loop as opposed to whatever has occurred, however many years ago. I do have some questions also. Are there sidewalks planned in this?
Yes, there are.
Just
Right now,
restate your name for the record so the tape knows who you are.
Sure. My name is Sam Hemingway. I'm an engineer with the firm of Garofalo and Associates, doing business out of Providence. Yes, there are sidewalks proposed specifically along School Street. I'm not sure that the extent on the remaining frontage is more a function of the condition of the existing sidewalks. They are not fully proposed at this point. Hasn't been fully vetted, though.
What about internal to the site, where you have somebody walking from point A to point B, they have to go right through the travel lanes in the parking lot?
Yeah, we anticipate a primary core walking path to get across the travel lane, but certainly would anticipate a central core walk rather than a lot of hardscape and impervious surfaces. We think it's there are a sufficient number of identified travel paths to get students and people using that lot to the main entries of the school.
Okay, can you give us the dimensions of the outdoor learning space, and how does that compare with the current internal space within the high school?
Well, you know, frankly, it has not been developed to a point that I could drill down too deeply on it. The intent, though, is for a common space that integrates the Hazard Building and the new school to provide a secure and accessible but still detached zone to be an amenity to the building. I'm gonna let the architect speak more, but we certainly intend on focusing on that. That's one of the primary charges of the current landscape team now, to try and zero in on exactly what the needs are and how to best utilize that for the school.
Just because historically, the internal space for the current high school was redesigned several years ago to become a better learning space. It had not been kept up prior to that. They used recycled materials. It was really a wonderful idea that is something that I think many people will feel should be integrated into this new facility. So again, that's why the question for the size relative to number of students and having the ability to actually utilize that. We did not receive, granted this is pre-application, but landscaping is going to be very important with an institutional project of this size. So that's something that we'll be looking for. Also, is there any kind of LEED certification for this building?
So we are required to comply with Northeast CHIPS, which is currently equivalent to LEED Silver. So we are driving our energy use index as low as possible. So there are a number of required sustainable features that we need to incorporate into the project, but we are not pursuing any type of LEED certification at this time.
Solar on the roof?
Part of the RIDE guidelines is that we must provide for infrastructure for PV, solar voltaics on the roof. So that will be part of the project. As the project progresses, if funds are available to allocate towards a PV system or grants are applied for, then yes, we will be able to accommodate those. But we will have all of the infrastructure prepared to accept it.
There are many communities across the country that require any new municipal buildings to have solar. There is a significant slope on the site. Have you thought about how you're going to manage that in terms of cut and fill, as well as there are two detention ponds that are directly adjacent to residential lots, specifically 4 and 3, and it will be very important that you consider the design of those and consider the impact relative to 100-year storm or greater.
Agreed.
Other comments, questions? Robin?
First of all, just to check, the geothermal was a no-go on this site, right?
So we conducted a return on investment compared to other systems that are just as energy efficient, and it was determined that the geothermal system is not the lowest life cycle cost. However, we are going to be using that test well that we did to heat and cool a portion of the building where we have construction tech, so that that system can become a teaching tool for that area of the building.
Kimball Street? So is that the original connection there that already exists?
Yes.
I thought so. So in the past, the high school had to shut that off because the kids would rip through there and
Right.
try to exit the parking lot really quickly. I'm wondering if that's going to lead to the same problems that it historically led to.
Yeah, maybe I misunderstood the question. So Kimball Street does in fact extend to the property. It will now be on the backside of the field, so there is no intent to connect to that, to re-establish a connection at that location with the project.
Okay, I
But it-
didn't see
but it
that in
does
the
exist.
plan. Okay,
Yeah.
so there is no back and
No.
exit, okay, all right.
Other than pedestrian.
I'm curious about the parking. I'm not sure, I see that you have designated staff parking, student parking. How does that compare to current parking?
There's a modest increase in total parking. The allocation of the spaces is a little difficult to tell how the current school operates, but I want to say it's an order of magnitude 10 to 15 spaces increase. Again, the student count is changing pretty considerably, as is the configuration, but basically the net result is going to be very similar to the existing.
So it's a
conditions.
negligible increase. My
Correct.
concern is that, I don't have any science behind this, but it appears to me that there's a considerable amount of parking for the high school that occurs on Route 108. And as we're looking at changing zoning in other parts of the town and looking to perhaps increase development opportunities elsewhere, we're going to be putting larger demands on the roadways that we have. And so I'm just concerned, how do we know that this is adequate parking to accommodate the students and the faculty that we anticipate being there going forward, when currently a lot of that parking is accommodated off-site?
If the answer is it will wholly comply to the regulation, we certainly intend on doing that. There's been a lot of change in how students arrive and leave schools in the last 10 years. We expect it's going to continue to change. We routinely have to do a balance of, right, we don't want to pave the whole site just for the sake of resolving that problem. I'm certainly aware of the parking, off-site parking that is going on, and am cognizant of it. We feel that the parking that's proposed, if managed properly, is in fact the correct number of spaces for the property. So we can document that in whatever manner this board seems, thinks is appropriate. But certainly as it relates to the town's ordinances for parking at the school, there is an excess of parking that's provided on the plan.
And then the second thing is, I'm fine with the building facing School Street, but I am concerned about the parking that goes behind, because now what you're proposing, there's a massive parking lot that's all facing on Columbia, which is a fairly major throughway. So somebody commented about landscaping, and I think that this is an area that really cries out for that. We currently are dealing with Old Tower Hill Road, which looks like a massive parking lot from the street. And this proposal, as you look at how Columbia is going to go, you're proposing massive parking again. So I think landscaping is going to be critical here.
I certainly agree. I'm not sure I understand the massive parking on Columbia Street, what the concern is.
If you look at your design, that's student parking all along the back and a driveway going out, and isn't that all fronting on Columbia Street?
I mean, it's 150 feet away, the mass of the parking. So I I'm not exactly sure how to address the concern. I don't fully understand. So we believe that both the configuration of the connections, the separation from the street itself, and the grades, there's a significant grade differential between those two areas, will provide a visual break and from the road traffic and the parking facility. That's the intent of the configuration that we've shown. If you have a concern or think that adjustments are warranted, again, we would love to look at it.
I simply think it cries out for plantings.
Is planting means more internal islands or planting around the perimeter, of which there's none shown on this
No,
plan?
just something that's going to screen the asphalt from the roadway. And also, you're going to want you're going to have drainage concerns, I would think. I'm not an engineer, so who knows?
Oh,
And my final concern comes with the construction schedule. How do we anticipate that the students are going to be able to learn anything while there's construction going on next door? That may not be a question for you, but it is a concern for me.
Just to follow up on one of Caper's comments, I think one of the areas of concern is the amount of impervious surface on the site. Do you have a landscape architect on your team at this point in time?
Yes. Yes.
Probably would have been great to have them here tonight because they tend to think a little differently from the standard engineering mindset. And we have always, in every project that we review, ask a lot of questions and have a lot of concerns about stormwater and lack of pervious surfaces. Have you any plans to try to mitigate, as Caper said, a very large area of impervious surface? And probably if you looked at the lot coverage, it's significant. So that's something that kind of should be part of the plan early on. The other thing I just wanted to mention is that when you submit review materials, make sure that your maps are accurate. You sent us this lovely multicolored map, but you have the entire area of the Oaks listed as open space. So accuracy was pretty important. Susan?
I have a couple of questions for you. So actually, it's good that the plans are up. And I think Maria might have mentioned something earlier. That parking lot that's in the top left-hand corner, did you say that you are planning to put some sort of pedestrian access from that parking area to the school that's not just either cutting across the drainage basin or walking in the travel lane?
Yes, well, we anticipate a pedestrian connection there. I'm not sure that we've worked out the specifics of it yet.
Okay.
Well, I'll leave it at that.
And then, and I'm not a traffic engineer, but I don't know if that's the entrance or the exit, but will that be an awkward traffic pattern to have all of those cars backing out of spots into that travel lane? Because it does look like a travel lane. And I suppose it'll be used like a travel lane, and you'll have cars backing into that travel lane. Is that a safety concern, or I don't know if I articulated that well enough? Okay.
I'm not sure I heard it well enough, to be honest with you, but if
I can
certainly
attempt
there is a
to
traffic lane
articulate
through the
that.
parking lot, so.
So in the northwest corner of the site where you have the curvilinear road, which looks like a main access point to that parking lot, being a main drive aisle, I think Susan's point is if it's intended to be a main drive aisle, then every single parking spot is potentially a conflict to that main drive aisle. So maybe it's the functionality of that being one-way versus two-way or less prominent as a main access point?
I'll look harder at that topic. You know, we strongly feel that getting another entrance in that general location is important to the circulation. There, again, but I will tell you that schools' traffic components are complex because there's different types of, there's bus activity, which we all know has very specific needs. There's staff activity, which has a different type of motion and relative to the building. There's parent drop-offs, which act in a very specific way for short duration. And there's students, drivers, which most of us know. So I absolutely recognize that it's a large parking field going with a travel lane going for a long distance through the field. If it wasn't a school, I think I would have more concern over that. I think, much like speed bumps, it is an important element in keeping speeds down and massing and congregating the users in certain ways on site.
So I just want to kind of echo Susan's concern, and I used to be responsible for all the parking on the Navy base, so both the design and the maintenance, and we never want to have a parking place that backs up in through where the path, a throughway. And I would be probably more concerned here with their students and potential accelerating out of the parking lot. And then also the curvature adds even another concern because of the line of sight. I think there's easy ways that you could address this with maybe slightly enlarging it and then put the passage to one side and then have the parking places so they don't back up into that throughway. But I would, from my experience, being responsible for the parking on the base for like 25 years, I've seen a lot of accidents, and they usually happen when you have this type of situation.
I just had a question for staff. This is a GI zone, so typically the projects go in the GI zone. We don't really review those, do we? So why are we reviewing this one?
So it is my understanding and working with legal counsel that the town is not exempt from their own zoning regulations. Therefore, they are going through the permitting process similar to any non-municipal entity. So the fire station in Perryville, EMS just came before you, yes.
Yep.
You get me again? Okay, so it looks to me like this is more internal to the school itself. The main entrance to the theater is on School Street, but there's very little parking on School Street. And the South Kingstown High School has a top-notch orchestra and theater department, and sometimes they have some very large events. Mm-hmm. So I don't know where parking would take place on this site and whether or not you're opening the doors up on the north side of the building to have theater guests come through the building, or if pedestrian access is going around the building, or I guess that was one of my concerns, is how, for gigantic events with 500 people attending, how that traffic pattern works.
Sure, and it also relates to how the school operates daily. If you look at this as the first floor plan, the yellow rooms to the left represent the academic core, and that is the 3-story tower. The area in white, basically, which looks like a void here on this plan, that is both the main entrance from School Street on the south, and from the north, the entrance that faces the student parking lot. To the right of that, in the teal, is the student commons, the cafeteria. That is all open with the exception of the kitchen. And to the south of that is the main office area. Further down the plan is the purple, which is the theater, and the green, which is the gym. It is anticipated that the main entrance and the entrance on the south and on the north are where students will enter into the building so that they can be controlled and very secure, very simple. But also large events would be using that student commons as a pre-function space for either the gym or the auditorium, which is that teal area right next to that vertical circulation space and plan. So we do anticipate that parking will be in the front and parking will be in the back. They will both be coming in from the back and from the front into that pre-function space and then distributing to the school either in the auditorium or in the gymnasium. I failed to mention one thing. We are fortunate enough that on our school building committee, there's representation from the town, which is right now Luke Murray, and he is a landscape architect. Although he is not the landscape architect for this project, he has certainly provided his input for the number of years on that. Luke, do you have anything that you want to speak to?
Luke Murray, Deputy Town Manager and School Building Committee. I'm speaking on behalf of my capacity in the school committee. So yes, I had a long practicing career in landscape architecture, and went to URI and came out of a fabulous program there. As Phil knows, and Phil has worked with me both on this project and going back into another project from about 3 to 4 years ago. But we've been working on this for about 2.5 years. And I constantly circle back to landscape. So some of those community sessions that we had, a lot of it had to do with screening, lighting, all the things that you've talked about. We had pretty extensive sessions with the community, and we had some pushback along the way. So it is something that we're dedicated to. I fully get what you're saying about the massing and the parking. I hear you. And that appendage to the left side of the plan, to the west side of the plan, is the last component. The building committee hasn't really weighed in much on that component. The primary project that we've been dealing with is the northern parking area, that block, and the building. And a lot of this, as Phil said, has been kind of been forced into this situation. That sounds bad, I know, but it actually is a good force into the design because of the way the land and the function of the school has to continue to operate as we build. That and sometimes works in design when you kind of get parameters, because it created a framework where it actually came out with a pretty good, what I think is really good design. We're still, and all that to say, we're working on the parking to the west. I hear your comments, and I actually, it's great to hear them. Stormwater is still much at play. We're still working on that. And landscaping is still much at play. It is something that we will be screening that parking. We realize that it's residential around there. We did work with the neighbors. You mentioned Kimball Street. Part of the design was reactive. At one point, we did have an access coming down from Kimball, and the neighbors weighed in on that and said, no way. And we heard them, and we completely discontinued that. They're now backing up on a field. So there was a lot of benefits to that process.
And I have one more question, and it might be for Mr. Murray, I'm not really sure. But I'd like to understand the evolution of the design of the building. This doesn't look very much like the one that was presented back when we voted on this project. And I guess for me...
Not meaning the planning board, meaning the town as a whole on the bond.
Yeah, no, I haven't seen it. And I'm only speaking for myself, but to me, this town has a lot of granite, it has a lot of brick, it has clapboard, it has a lot of old history. This school building, to me, looks like a architectural design from left field. Nothing left field. But this doesn't in any way resemble any of the architecture in the town. And I think the original plans had some brick. And I think that if it had, for me, if it was, a brick and granite look, not trying to look old-fashioned, but something more consistent with the spirit of the town and the architecture in the town, it would feel better for me than this, which when I saw it, I thought it might look like it was in a Chicago suburb. My husband thought it looked like it was in Arizona. Like it just doesn't in any way connect to the architecture of the town. And then you've got the little Hazard School next door, which is completely different. And I wonder if there's been some effort to maybe try to harmonize with the surrounding neighborhood as well as the spirit of the town the historic mill town that we're living in.
So
Thanks.
I can certainly address that. Early on in the project, and you talked about evolution, right? One of our first sessions during the stage 1 and stage 2 process with RIDE, we met with the community, we had these open design sessions, and actually Phil and his team came with, how many images? 50? 50 images of buildings throughout the United States, school buildings. And they ranked them. And we had a compiled list of preferreds, right? And obviously, the preferreds in South Kingstown tend to be more of a traditional design, exactly what you're talking about. In addition, the building committee has been discussing that as well. The original designs that were shown to the community, which I will say the blocking is very similar. If you take out the facade and everything else, the blocking of the building, that academic core, which you see on the left, has flipped a little bit because to economize and compact the building with regards as we go through value management. But in whole, the blocking hasn't changed very much. The facade has, to your point. The designer, we've already gone through an iteration since the bond has passed that the building committee weighed in on and did not like and was pretty vocal on that. It didn't include a lot of brick. It had a lot of metal, had a lot of modern, even more modern materials. This design, although it probably doesn't reflect in the rendering, actually has mostly brick. And it was determined that is actually a better value management strategy because brick is available and it's a lower cost, quite frankly. What it doesn't incorporate is some of the things we used to seeing in South Kingstown, which is things like granite or limestone or things along those lines, right? Putting westerly granite into a building like this is going to, as you can imagine, significantly elevate the cost. So we're trying to find a balance here between new and old, value management materials that's today, not 100 years ago. And there is, opinions vary, right? We've gotten good input on this design, and we've gotten poor input on this design. And there's everything in between. I think it's going to be a bit of a democracy with the building committee going through this, and we're constantly going out to the community. We'll be going out to them again. But we've got to eventually pick a lane. Schools are glass. There's a question of whether we should be resembling Hazard Building exactly and trying to take off that architecture or be a more modern school building, right? This is 21st century learning with those types of learning spaces. So I don't know what the final answer is. I know that we're still a work in progress on this, and I hear you. I don't know where we're going to finally land. I would have loved, I'm going to tell you my personal, I weighed in and I was very vocal on this. Like, I would have loved to seen a tower. I'd love to seen a pitched roof on this building. I would have loved to seen something that incorporated Peacedale Library or something along those lines. When you get in the realities of budget and as I have to work with the town council and the tax rates that are going up, and keeping this project in line with expectations, budgetary expectations, it becomes very hard to add those architectural details and meet all the 21st century education requirements. That's our core function as a building committee. So all that to say, we're working on it. We'll get back to you on that. Yep.
I have to say I agree 100% with what Susan just said, and she said it very tactfully. So, the site that this building will go on has been historically very wet. Please keep that into consideration. Obviously, you're going to look at stormwater, soil type, and so on, but that's definitely an issue. And I do want to reiterate the issue with the outdoor learning space. This is being described as a state-of-the-art project. We want to make sure that in keeping with sort of modern education, that the area that you have designated as an outdoor learning area is actually that and not just connecting parking lot A to parking lot B or building A to building B. Other thoughts from folks? Liz?
Could we go back to the plan one more time? The site plan? No, the floor plan. Yeah, the first floor. I know this is still at an early stage, and I wasn't in discussions that you had with school committee and other folks, but I just really question having the entrances way over on, I guess it's the west side, and having all, if there's a big event in the auditorium or in the gym, and then having all those people trek down past the administration area, the length, almost the entire length of the school, to get to those two big spaces. And I would have thought there might be some way, as you see in other schools, to have the entrances, or maybe even another set of entrances, closer to the large spaces where there will be larger gatherings. Was that looked at all?
Sure, and what also taken into consideration was how the school operates daily with students and how they are controlled and managed safely. And, eliminating other accessory entrances, combining them together so students can come in. It's easy to manage for the administration. It's right next to the student commons where they would go to breakfast or lunch. It is not that great of a distance as you would imagine between if you come in there and then go to the auditorium or the gym. That administration core, the blue area, can be completely closed off, as well as the academic tower can be completely closed off when there are large functions, so that the public is only accessing either the auditorium, the gymnasium, or the cafeteria space, those spaces that are designed to accommodate larger groups of people. Obviously, we have other means of egress, et cetera.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question for Andy. Given the fact that you have an adjacent listed building, the hazard building on the lot, is there any kind of mechanism for HPHC review, comment, what have you?
If it's on the National Register, then there would be review by the State Historic Preservation Heritage Commission, essentially a 106 review, just, no detrimental effect. Since there's the use of the state funds for it.
And we also are required to engage with them as part of the RIDE process. So they are aware of this project, and they're awaiting further communication from us.
Thank you. Other thoughts, comments, questions?
I have one question. It's more for my personal edification. If you could, looking at the site plan as a whole, if you could just, I see 3 major ingress and egress points from the street. Can you just show me where the current entrance to the high school is? I'm just trying to visualize it.
Sure, the current entrance to the high school is north of that appendage. So the high school is in that area right there where the fields are indicated. That's the northernmost entrance. And the southern entrance is very closely aligned to where we are proposing our new entrance. We anticipate bus drop-off and pick-up along School Street, right there, and parent drop-off along the roadway to the north, giving them a much longer queuing area, and then staff parking to the right, student parking to the north, visitor parking to the south.
So when school lets out and the kids and everybody starts leaving, you're expecting the buses to come out onto School Street, parent pick up along School Street, and the student parking will exit California from that parking lot exit?
Yes.
We're trying to the greatest extent possible separate those 3 groups, student, bus, and parent drop-off.
So you're actually sort of taking some of the pressure away.
Trying, but more work to do.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments? Anything from staff or DPS at this point?
I think just as an overview, the plans from a design standpoint with stormwater management, landscaping are in a very preliminary manner and shape right now to both Phil, Sam, and Luke's testimony tonight, that they are evolving and a work in progress, and they're trying to tick all the boxes off and satisfy many masters, as well as go through a permitting process. So again, anything that they don't meet regulatorily, they will need to request waivers. We've had one large internal staff meeting with the design team in anticipation of this meeting. We were involved in the administrative permitting path. We're trying to stay distinct and separate from Luke and that team, that we're not sitting with them on the design team. They're submitting plans to us and we're reacting to them. So it's a unique scenario that it's kind of a town-sponsored project being reviewed by town staff, understanding that there is limitations on overall funding and a program that they need to meet. So there's some middle ground that needs to be found. I had some preliminary discussions with Mark with regards to his input tonight, and I don't want to speak for him, but again, these are very preliminary plans. They're evaluating underground stormwater storage and management versus above ground, or a combination of the two. But Mark hasn't seen, stormwater calculations haven't been fully vetted. I don't know if they're doing a 10-year, 25-year, or to your point, Maria, if their design is 25 years, we still should know what happens in 100-year. And it may be that ponds get overtopped, but at least we know where the water goes when they get overtopped, and there's a management plan for that. So again, the plans are evolving, so we'll stay tuned and provide input as we go through the process.
I actually have one more concern that I'd just like to point out. We talked about ingress and egress in terms of access from the parking, but it's a high school, and I am also concerned about safety, and I have no real insight into what are the recommended protocols for ingress and egress in light of some of the violence that we've seen throughout the country in the past decade or so. So it's just something that I would be I'm sure you guys are considering it, but it's something that I would like to hear about as we have further conversations.
So you've heard some of our concerns. This is obviously a good example in that as the town pursues this very important project, they are required to follow the same process and same rules that they make for applicants. I know that there is a request to combine stages of review. It would be very important for you folks to be extremely well organized. I realize this is at an early point, but very well organized if your submission is going to be for both master plan and preliminary. Thoughts from board members on combining the stages of review?
I might object to that, not trying to make it more complicated for you, but because it's such a big project. And I don't think we need to waste your time, and I know that we'll try to be as tight with our thoughts as possible, but for me, it's such a big project that combining those steps for me would be maybe not my choice.
Madam Chair, if I can just weigh in on that. With regards to the submission process associated with master plan and preliminary, the things that you're going to want to know about and dive into are not revealed until preliminary. So if they come in with master plan, what you see on the board is what you're gonna see at master plan. So I wanna say, you've seen part of what would be in a master plan submission. So again, if they come in for a master plan, you're gonna have questions about circulation, and they're gonna say, we'll deal with that at preliminary. You're gonna ask about the sizing of detention basins, and you're gonna wanna see their stormwater analysis, and the response is, it's not required at master plan. So I think in this instance, to get you to a place where you'll be able to react and ask for information that they are required to submit as part of the process, gets you to preliminary. You know, if you ask for a landscaping plan, not required to submit it at master. Traffic analysis, not required to submit it at master plan. So you're gonna get to preliminary much quicker than you think. So I think the master plan is a continuation of this discussion tonight, and potentially doesn't offer anything new. Again, that's my knowledge of the process.
I appreciate that. That makes a lot of sense to me. But I also would hate to see them spend an awful lot of time investing in, I don't know, a landscape plan that won't be viewed favorably by this board. So is there a way to have them not waste time going down a pathway that, you know, like that we would see some ideas sooner before there's a whole lot of investment in them? Say at like that top parking lot that we're talking about, if what they come back with is also something that this board has a problem with, let's not waste too much time engineering it. You know what I'm saying?
There's nothing that prevents them to continue to have access to staff, and then also ask to come back to you in another preliminary manner before they submit a formal application for that preliminary, or combined master and preliminary plan. Again, I think I want to say that as staff, we've gotten to know the planning board over the years and have a good understanding of what your wishes are, and balancing those wishes and with the regulatory side too. So again, we're available to the applicant, being the town, and we'll try and give feedback throughout the process to avoid the scenario you're describing, Susan. We may not be able to eliminate all of it, but we'll do our best, if asked to have them walk through that minefield.
Thanks.
Thoughts from other board members on this? Joe?
I mean, I think a big part of the reviews, both with the master and the preliminary level, is not necessarily our review and what our comments are, but opening it up to the public and understanding what all the impacts are, and being able to thoroughly mitigate whatever those issues are. If this was a private project, I would no doubt want to keep them separate, just because this is such a big area with so many impacts to so many people. But I guess my question to Jamie is, what other forums are going to be available to the neighboring area for them to address their concerns and make sure they're addressed by the town? Or is this the primary one? Because I'll tell you, that's what's going to make a difference on whether I think they should be combined or not.
I think Luke Murray informed you tonight that they have a school standing building committee every 2 weeks where there's an opportunity there, and Luke, correct me if I'm wrong, for people to provide input. And then, you know, there's a process here. I think, again, Town Council has it on their agenda. There's an update literally at every single council member I've been to in the last few months, and I think there's a continuation of that moving forward. There's public comment at the Town Council meetings. School board is still meeting, and there's an opportunity for public comment at any school board meeting. The difficulty I have, Joe, and I don't want to sound like I'm disagreeing with you, but if you go just to master plan and the public comes out to that meeting, I want to say in my experience, 90 to 95% of the questions they're going to have, the applicant is not required to address them at master plan.
they may ask questions that the applicant is not necessarily prepared for, but the applicant hears the concerns from the neighbors, and they address them, and we get a better product at preliminary when we have separate. And again, I'm not necessarily saying that I'm against it. I just want to make sure that there's enough. This is a big project that affects a lot of people and has a lot of impacts. I just want to make sure there's enough forums that we don't have just one shot at the apple, or I shouldn't even say we, because it's not we. The audience that shows up has only one shot at the apple. So that is my concern. If there's adequate forums for that to be all vented, then great, let's put them together. But if there's not, and then there's a reason why there's two reviews.
And it's my understanding there has been adequate opportunity. There will continue to be adequate opportunities. And I think the request by the applicant to combine master and preliminary also assumes some risk by the applicant, because they're jumping in the deep end of the pool because they are going further down in design. And if they do that without public input, however they receive that, they're assuming some of the risk, and my understanding is based on the request to combine them, they're going into this process eyes wide open.
If I may.
Yes.
Do you want me to identify myself again or no? Luke Murray, Deputy Town Manager, School Building Committee. So, listen, I hear what you're saying. It is a different venue. We're dealing with all different audiences. We've had meetings for the past 2.5 years, and there's people who still haven't heard about the project, right? Amazing as that is, right? We all have different forms of people. Some people pay attention to council, some people don't. Some people pay attention to our meetings, some don't even know they go on. More than happy to come from master plan. If you feel like you would vet it out through a fair process, that is not our critical path on schedule right now. RIPD's and our IDEM is. So as long as we can move expeditiously through that, I will tell you, we could probably turn around a landscape plan initially. I've just talked to Phil pretty quickly. I don't expect this plan to move too much, but I'd like to get the master plan sooner than later to at least get in front of you so we can keep the process rolling. But more than happy to do it.
The other option, too, is to agree to an additional pre-application meeting that would allow us to see how far you've come. But I'd like to hear from the rest of the board. Robin?
Well, no, I have to agree with Joe, and I think that they're not in a hurry through this process. Like, there's other things that impede your progress. So I think that more meetings are better, because a lot of people aren't going to make that one opportunity.
Peter? Then Liz?
Not know about this, what's going on in this town. I mean, this has been like ad nauseum forever, and I think more meetings about this is just going to cause more diversity, people are not going to agree more and be more pissed off and talk about budget, and we're not going to get anywhere, and we're going to kick it down the road and not get anywhere.
Liz?
I think there is some value to combining them, because as Jamie said, the more information you have at any given point, the better your comments can be. And they are assuming a certain risk of taking more design initiative, but I, for one, would like to see more information rather than less.
Caper?
I'm actually of a mixed mind. I think there are benefits either way. I'm not adverse to combining them, but to encourage the applicant to come to meetings whenever they feel it's appropriate as well. So, I mean, you talked about the staff being accessible and made it clear that the staff has a good understanding of what we want. But I think that it's important to you that everyone is kept apprised, including the town. And in all candor, I think ultimately you're a better judge than I am about when that needs to be done. So I'm inclined to favor combining them with an invitation to you to come forward as you think appropriate.
Jamie and Andy, Procedurally, how would this move forward if they did go to preliminary? Would we have the same time constraints that we have with any other project of this nature, or would there be more opportunity, given the complexity of this, for a continuation if need be, and adequate public meetings as to what Joe was referring to?
Well, so this is a real yes and no answer. This is a real yes and no answer. You know, legally, I suppose it depends on the willingness of the applicant and the town, whether they would agree to an extension of time. So I think, you know, more than likely there would be that flexibility. But I also would say no, because I know, I'm dealing with this in several communities, there are various RIDE deadlines that have to be met with different submissions and stuff. And those will be more restrictive than, or maybe more restrictive than your timelines or not. That they'll have to have answers that they've got to file by RIDE by certain dates, or they miss certain funding incentives. So that's, I don't think it really makes a difference one way or the other. I do think, I agree with Jamie that, you know, that there's not much sense in this sort of thing for doing it in master plan and preliminary. And I think, you know, we'll all be flexible. If they come in with preliminary, we'll be more flexible with certain of the requirements that would otherwise be needed on the checklist, again, knowing that it's the town. And they'll be more reasonable, you know, to work with, since we're all at the same town and all at the same place.
Joe?
Let me propose an option. How about if we have combined the master plan and the preliminary, but as part of the process, they meet with the neighboring property owners, have a design meeting to talk about site plan only. You don't need to talk about the school, but just the site plan and the impacts that it potentially has to the neighboring property owners. And they have that meeting before we have our combined preliminary master.
I would also suggest that they come back for another informal pre-application meeting, because when you have the conversations within the realm of kind of the planning board regulatory mindset, that might differ to a certain extent from what you're hearing at a meeting with the neighbors or a school building committee meeting, just to give everyone an opportunity to be thinking in a broad, comprehensive manner. What do people think about that? Add Joe's idea and another informal pre-application so that everything is moving forward on the same page, allowing for your time frame constraints, and that way we would receive, as Liz referred to, more information, which, as you can probably tell, is preferred by this board, since we have so many questions.
How do they just say, hey, we're having a meeting this date, or are they sending certified letters? What do we, I mean?
I think they should reach out to the neighboring property owners that would normally get notice. And they ask them, tell us what your concerns are, tell us what your vegetation, tell us where you think this impacts you, and how can we help you out? Just like we do during meetings.
I'm just trying to understand, how do we prove it, or how do we say that they did it, right? Like, is it the certified mail system like we would do?
I think that it's the town themselves, so.
Yeah, it is the town, so.
I think that if they say, yeah, we're gonna invite them, instead of them, if they hear it or not, the neighbors, because I'm gonna tell you, there's some people, I know you think everybody in the town knows about this, people ask me, what's going on with the school? Well, we really haven't seen it yet. And so I think some people do, and I think some people don't. That's my impression. I think that inviting them to a meeting versus if they heard about it, they're going to come, and just relying on that. The invitation makes them part of the process.
So, Madam Chair, if I may, if I can summarize.
Certainly.
So I think what's being discussed and what may be appropriate is that you're entertaining a motion to combine master plan and preliminary. with the understanding that the applicant will make a good faith effort to hold a community meeting as it relates to the specifics of the site plan.
Yeah. And the impacts
And-
to the neighboring property owners.
And that they will return to the planning board in a preliminary pre-application manner prior to submitting the formal application, perhaps with a more vetted landscape plan and
Stormwater and...
pedestrian connections.
I mean, is that something that does that seem reasonable? I think, truthfully, I would think it would result in a very preliminary plan and that meeting to go smoother.
It would.
So we can do an abutters list, we can pull it and notify direct like we would any zoning hearing or anything else. That's not a problem. More than glad to work with planning staff on that. They can attend and take notes and report back to the board. We're kind of bifurcating our process here. With regards to stormwater, that's the only one that is a little bit more difficult because part of this is the value management process, and the building committee has to continue to give direction to Sam and the team on how we're going to go with this, whether it be, because originally we had all underground, and that it was recommended that we maybe move off of that for cost reasons. However, we've made other reductions. So all that to say, I guess to Andy's point, like all this is a work in progress, and we also have RIDE deadlines and other. So we'll make good faith effort to come back with it as advanced as we can with the stormwater. We'll work on a significantly enhanced and advanced landscape plan, and we'll have that landscape plan available before we go meet with the public, so that way our feedback is reactive to that plan. And we'll make, no problem getting out to the community and presenting, everything, all the ins and outs of the project.
So the motion would be that to combine the stages of review, have an additional pre-application type, whatever you want to call it, meeting prior to the combined stage of review meeting, and have a noticed meeting with the neighbors.
Yeah, we can have a notice meeting with the neighbors for impacts, potential
Okay.
impacts.
Would someone like to make that motion?
So moved.
Motion from Joe, do we have a second? I'll second. Second from Liz. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Nays? Motion passes. Thank you, we look forward to next go-round. Our next agenda item is a discussion with the Historic District Commission regarding their work and comprehensive community plan implementation. I think we'll pull up a couple of chairs. If the board would like to take a 5-minute break while we get everything set up, yes? Set. Welcome, Murray Gates from the HDC. I know that you've been waiting for quite some time to meet with us, and we are looking forward to hearing what you folks are up to and how we can help.
Wonderful, and thank you so much for having us. And I do apologize for being so light in terms of representation. Rich Youngkin, who most of you know, is battling some type of respiratory illness, so he really wanted to be here. And as a former professional planner, he speaks your language very well. But next time we'll get him here. Yes, so we wanted to get in front of you, ideally before we spoke to the town council, but that's okay. They were able to accommodate us back in October of 2024. And essentially, I wanted to start with some of the things that we shared with them because it was similarly purposed. We wanted them to understand what we were up to and to give us some feedback if they had any. And then also to talk a little bit about some of the things that both the planning board and the HDC are co-responsible parties in the comprehensive plan. So to start the discussion, there's really two influences to the update that we gave to the town council and that I'm subsequently giving to you. The one is the comprehensive plan, because we refer to that every meeting as our measure of progress. Some months we make a lot more progress than others, and sometimes we spend very little time saying what we've accomplished. But we do, at every meeting, as I said, give ourselves a grade on whether or not we've accomplished task XYZ. There's 21 tasks that the HDC is assigned to within the comp plan as action items. And there's a number where the planning board and different entities within the town are assigned as well. So that's the one influence to our update. And the other influence to the update was this great training course that we received through the National Alliance of Preservation Commissions. Maria attended, as did Andy. And it was a really excellent opportunity to find out what the people who make a profession of historic preservation say is how to be successful as a preservation commission and how to further the mission of your communities to preserve historic resources. And what we heard there was encouraging to me because it's what I had hoped to hear. And it essentially was your responsibility, preservation commissions, is mostly around education and outreach for your community. So although everybody in town seems to associate us with the design approvals that come before us. We're going to put a new roof on. We're going to change the landscaping. We're going to do something with the windows. And they have to come to us if they live in the district of Kingston, the historic district. Everybody else outside of the town, in the town of South Kingstown, isn't part of our regulatory responsibility. But we still have historic resources spread throughout our town. So what is our responsibility towards the rest of the town as it relates to historic preservation? It's a great question. It's not one that I necessarily have an answer to. So again, two influences, comp plan and this wonderful educational opportunity that we had back in October of 2023. And it came together for us to be able to say to the town council, look, we've been spending all of our time for the recent and distant past focusing on applicants from the Kingston Village coming to us and saying, is this approved, is this not approved, and giving feedback to them. What the comp plan, hence the people in this community, say that we should be doing is all of these other things that are outside of Kingston. It's the education and the outreach. It's the helping folks with designation for historic preservation, either on the national or the state register. It's doing some of the historic preservation planning. It's doing surveys for historic properties. And only a very small minority of your time should be spent on the design review process. Well, we were out of balance because everything we were doing was design review. So we've tried to change that by focusing on many of the comprehensive plan activities, all of which, by the way, fit really in two categories: historic preservation planning and outreach and engagement. And yeah, what you're seeing there is an example of some of the short-term action items. Typical stoplight grading system. Red says you're not doing so good, yellow says you're okay, and green says you're on target. So with that said, I'd like to say that we've made decent progress, but there's a lot of things that we are still trying to get done. Some of those we had been waiting to get in front of you and say, what do you think about these particular action items that are co-owned? And my eyes, and even with glasses, aren't good enough to even read what's up there. Review and revise where? Yeah, so as you'd expect, most of the ones that we co-owned have to do with updating zoning ordinances, design guidelines that impact or are related to historic resources. Rich, and with the help of Brian, who's our liaison and staff, have made some progress in some of those updates, and perhaps Brian can talk more to it because Rich is not here. But I think the ask around those specific updates to zoning would probably be a subsequent stream of meetings that would take place that staff would be able to help us with. How do we advance these updates so that the language is corrected in some instances? Brian, do you have anything you wanted to add around the work that you and Rich had been doing?
No, what Rich has done is Rich has gone through the subdivision regulations and looked for things where historic preservation is a concern, or where review of historical cultural resources might be better considered in the planning process. So I have those now, and I know that we are looking into the future of overhauling the subdivision regs, so the hope is that we will be able to incorporate Rich's suggestions as we move along with that bigger lift on the subdivision regs.
So in a nutshell, that's, from a very high level, that's what we've been doing, is trying to address the comprehensive plan items. And I, by the way, I think that it's a great tool, and for other boards and commissions to consider doing the same. It would be also very advantageous, I think, for the town council to have a common mechanism for updating them on progress. So to the extent that you have any influence around how that takes place, then that would be a great thing to see happen. And any support that you think that you could provide in helping us to promote the mission of having the Historic District Commission be not just the Kingston Commission, but somebody that advocates for and educates the community on historic preservation more wholly. I will tell you that we're kind of in the middle of the town council's decision. We had an ask that also went with our update, and that was to essentially update the town ordinance so that it reflects this not new role, but this role that would concur with the comprehensive plan. And we're in the midst of that process. The town council I will present to them once more, or the staff will, and they'll make a determination as to whether or not that zoning ordinance will be updated. If it's not updated, then it essentially, what is called for in the zoning ordinances, or what our responsibilities are, will stay mostly restricted to the Kingston district.
So are you saying that the role of the HDC via statute from our comprehensive plan is more broad than many folks in the community understand?
In the comprehensive plan, that's correct.
Yes.
And I think it was probably news to the town council. Some of them, I'm sure, have read through the comprehensive plan, but digesting all of the action items might be beyond all of us. So I think it was news to them, and I thought that they felt, at least at the first meeting, that the information was helpful, and it was presented in a way that they initially felt fairly comfortable with the idea of us going out and educating and providing outreach.
Sure. When we have our policy discussions, there have been so many times in which we have discussed having more interaction with other boards and commissions, seeing how we can help one another. We really understand what you're talking about. We get bogged down in our regular meetings and application reviews. You could see even tonight in our work session, we had some of that. And it's difficult to look at some of the wonderful goals that are present in the comprehensive plan that we would like to achieve and fall short on that because of all these other things that come our way in addition to application review. But people have questions for Murray?
Quick question.
Go ahead.
So you had said there were some 20-some-odd points that were referring potentially directly to the HDC. Of those, could you give us some examples and maybe some idea of which ones are readily attainable and which ones are going to be a much larger effort and which ones you would need assistance from us with and which ones, I guess, how do those look as achievable goals?
Sure. No, it's an excellent question. Well, there were some easy layups amongst the 21. Make available a great booklet that was produced or published in 1984, right? The list of historic architectural resources. Make it available at libraries. Okay, check. Very easy to do. There are others, and to your point about how can we work together on it, that do require the planning board, and they are related to updating subdivision regulations or design guidelines so that they consider historic resources. I don't know how much you folks have, I've heard over the years design guidelines come up, and I don't know if it's a hot topic now or if it's kind of been put to the side because you've got a lot of other things going on.
We would like it to be.
Sure. So those are a couple of examples of things that we acknowledge are lengthy activities and that would be very much, not only would like to have you involved, you are the center of that process. So we would like to be involved. Let's see if some others. So I don't remember how it was listed as an action item, but extending the Wakefield Historic District was something that I think was listed as, but it happened, right? So there was an effort to add additional elements to the Wakefield Historic District. Saugatucket Park and a couple of other commercial buildings were added. Let's see, anything come into mind, Brian? Things that we've stumbled on and need further help on?
Well, the
database. The database is a good one to talk about. This one is, I think, foundational to so many of the things that we do or that we hope to do, and that is taking that 1984 booklet, it's in print form, or you can get it electronically on the HDC's website, town website. It lists a couple hundred historic resources. Some of them are listed on the historic register. Some of them are eligible to be on the historic register. And then there's a lot of the other ones that are just out there, but historically relevant and valuable. What we have been trying to do is work with staff, and in particular Carol, our GIS specialist, to create a GIS layer that identifies where all the historic resources are. That's important for a number of reasons. It's important for the public, maybe as an applicant or maybe just as a homeowner, to know that their property is acknowledged as a historic resource, and maybe there's some benefits to that. It's important to staff to know when there's a project that comes up that impacts a historic resource, that it is a historic resource, because how could you know? I mean, you'd have to page through this booklet, which is not easy to use. It's not an easy tool to find out whether or not it's a historic resource or not. But if it were listed in the GIS, then it's more readily available. And I should, of course, give the staff credit. They would know, and they'd probably tell you. So that's one way. But it also helps us with other programs. We've considered different programs that we'd like to introduce, like tax credit programs. Maybe the environment's not ready for it now, but have a tax credit program that we could introduce to the town council for investments in historic properties, something that's done elsewhere in the state. Again, this town might not be ready for it now, but were it to be available, it could be based upon this inventory of historic resources. But first, we need the data to be cleaned, and that's been an exercise that's been somewhat elusive for us for different reasons that I won't necessarily get into. But I mentioned that one because we've been working on it for quite some time. And I'm sorry, Brian, I didn't give you a chance. Was there something else that you thought was relevant?
No, I mean, I did provide Lynn with, and it got appended to your agenda, a list of the implementation action items from the historic and cultural resource element of our comprehensive plan, where both the Historic District Committee and the Planning Board are listed as responsible parties for carrying that ball over the goal line. So you can refer to that. And rather than give you the entire list of action items, I just called out the ones that were related to the Planning Board.
One of the challenges that we have in making progress on this, you've got a nice complement of people around the table. Right now, we are 4, and with the possibility of one gentleman leaving, taking us down to 3, which would not be too good. So Susan had very nicely informed me that she's been working on trying to get some volunteers, yes. So anybody around the table that knows people that are interested in historic preservation, please feel free to get the word out. That's one way you can certainly help. If you know somebody that's really anxious in providing a service to their community. Well, I think Brian would be the best person, yeah. Certainly, if they want to find out more from a member of the commission, I'd be happy to talk to them. But the formal process is through Brian.
Well, all the applications go to the town clerk, and they're all available on the webpage. But certainly, if anybody has any questions, they can call me. I'll direct them where they need to go.
I think you just hit on this a little bit, but is there anything that we're holding you up, or perhaps it's a joint responsibility that you guys want to run with, or maybe it's a responsibility that we have that you want to say, hey, let us run with this, and then we'll report back? Kind of go into the process. Is there a better way that we can work together, especially if one of the other groups kind of hung up? Is there a better process?
Sure. Some of the history behind trying to get some of these revisions to town ordinance, the staff can tell you about, and I think they've been trying to balance your workload with our desire to get something in front of you, and Brian told you where we are with some of the updates that Rich Youngkin had made. I leave it to you folks and staff to determine the best way to promote or to get those onto your agenda and move those forward.
I mean, is there any of those things where you feel like you can run with, and then just maybe instead of waiting for us, you would run with it, and then you come back and say, this is what we're proposing, this is the draft, this is the guideline. I mean, I know you only get 3 people.
Sure.
The stone wall one sounds pretty easy.
Yeah. So, those types of things is if you want us to draft what something could look like and put it in front of you and say, this is what people have done in Rhode Island for protection of stone walls, and have you consider that.
And I don't think we have that document with the short, mid, and long term. That would be helpful for us to have that. And I'm sure you have a sense of how to better inform the public of the importance of historic resources in so many different ways. You know, it's economic development, it's, you know,
Sure, sure. Yeah, and that, quite frankly, is the biggest task in front of us, I think, is the education piece, and trying to find these venues for getting in front of people and making ourselves available for, okay, you own a historic property, do you know that there's a resource in town that can come and you can come and get answers to how you can leverage different benefits that are out there for historic buildings. And part of that also comes down to bandwidth as well. So knowing that we're 4 now, very soon to be 3, it makes it a little bit more difficult. If we had a full complement on the board, it would be easier to get to some of these things, to do the planning around an outreach event. The only thing that I think that we've been successful in doing in the past years has been, you know, putting together an awards program. I know Peter had some comments around one of the awards that was given the last time, and that's an example of something that at least raises the awareness of historic preservation in town, and to do more of those types of things.
So, other committees also have difficulty maintaining the membership. Affordable housing has, What do you see as the difficulty of retaining membership? I mean, I personally think that it's one of these things that if you feel that you're making changes in the town, you're more likely to stay. But if you feel like you're just spinning your wheels and nothing's changing, then the membership kind of decreases pretty quickly. But what's your thought?
Part of the argument that we made to the town to officially acknowledge what our role is, and that is town-wide, we're not just about Kingston, is a recruitment issue. If we want, I interviewed with the town council, and I said very explicitly, my interests are in promoting historic preservation throughout South Kingstown. I probably said something very nice about Kingston and said, you know, I'm having lived right outside the historic district, I care about it and I want to preserve it, but my interests are about the entire town of South Kingstown. So for us to be pigeonholed or to be thought of always as the Kingston Historic District Commission, I think that's an impediment. Because there's a lot more people out there that care about historic preservation than there are people that care about historic preservation just in Kingston.
and you know, if someone were to read the historic and cultural resources element of the comprehensive plan and also look at the introduction to the 4 village master plans that we have, it's very clear that the sense of history and the understanding of such and planning for it is really part of what collectively we have heard from people in the community.
Absolutely.
That's how those
Absolutely.
plans were developed. So,
And to your point about you know, the importance of emphasizing the economic benefits that come with historic preservation, the EDC has been one of the partners that we've been able to work with most closely.
excellent.
And I think they get it. I know that they get it.
Yeah.
So we've enjoyed that interaction. We'd like to have that interaction with more boards and commissions. And we've actually sent letters out. I think you probably received one to each of the boards and commissions saying, look, we're here. Remember, this is what we do, and we're happy to work with you on any of these things.
This is an impressive list. Clearly to have gone through these action items and assigned them priorities and looked at the partners that are required. This is a lot of good work.
It's been a useful tool for us. I wish we had been able to progress more of it, but time, yes. So with that, I'm certainly willing to stay for any more questions that you have, but that was really the objective of what I wanted to share with you, is that, you know, we are here, we do care about the big picture. We still care very deeply about Kingston, but we want to be acknowledged as somebody that can provide resources for historic preservation throughout the town, and always open to collaboration on that mission.
So would you say that historic preservation also includes things like scenic views?
That's funny that you should mention that. Peter, I'm going to bring this up. Amongst our awards that we put out a couple of years ago, we gave an award for an improvement to a historic scenic view. It was with Green Line Apothecary. And we all acknowledge that the Green Line Apothecary, what they did there to that building was not necessarily worthy of Historic Preservation Award. But what they did provide, at least when the vegetation doesn't grow, is this wonderful vista onto Riverside Cemetery. And that's what we awarded. It was because just that it was this beautiful, beautiful vista. And it's real small, but if you are in the right place, you've got this wonderful view onto a historic resource, which I was inspired by. If they maintain it and cut down whatever's growing there, invasive species, it would be there more permanently. I know, we never had a chance to get back and talk to you about that, yeah.
Other questions, comments? So is there a way that you can provide us with both updates via Brian and requests via letters so that we can kind of create and maintain the conversations and your goals? And
Absolutely.
maybe that will help push us to attain some of them ourselves.
Absolutely. And I admire, particularly for those of you that are not tending to stay up late at night, all of the dedication that you put in late hours. So thank you.
I would say the proactive piece is crucial, right? Like, you know, as a contractor or a builder, and I don't think I've been in front of the Kingston board, but every other board is a complete nightmare. It is disorganized, it is different depending on who shows up, you get a different opinion.
Peter, Mike, please.
Yep, it's on. So I think if you're reaching out to people and informing them and telling them, I think a lot of people, homeowners, don't even know that they own a historic one. So then when they want to go change the front door and all of a sudden this becomes a big thing, they go, oh my God, this board is crazy. Right. And in reality, if they're informed and say, hey, before you buy it, or if you buy it, or educated while you own it, I think that's important. I think the other piece starts to come into play is when other people are making a decision for their pocketbook, right? Like, now I have to go buy an all-wood window that costs 3 or 4 times the amount that a regular window would cost, right? So if you can show them those ways, but I think if you're reaching out to them early enough, they can be prepared and understand it. It's a shock when they walk in to think that they're going to go put that window in and spend $500, not $5,000.
Right.
I think
right.
those are the things that they need to prepare for, so they get caught off guard. So
absolutely, and it's those types of reactions that I think have unfortunately given people a certain opinion about the role that we play. In Kingston, we've tried to be proactive and make sure people are aware of the resources that are available to them and that they live in a historic district. And we send out postcards. Brian helped us to send out postcards to everybody to make sure that they are aware of their role as stewards of these properties. Everybody else in the town of South Kingstown has no obligation to do anything with their historic properties, and that's what the town has decided, and that's okay. So everything that we do outside of Kingston would be purely as a resource. It would be, you've got a historic resource, you could tear it down. You can get a demolition permit and tear it down tomorrow. But if you care about it, here's some things that you can do. Here's some grant opportunities that you can access. Or if you're looking for a design professional that specializes in renovating historic buildings, here are some ideas for you. So everything we do outside of Kingston would, not regulatory at all, no restrictions, it would be resources, guiding resources in education.
Even the meeting we had a few years ago about different products and options and opportunity, right? Like, we're running out of these products that we may
Yeah.
have to use that we won't have anymore. So like looking at other ideas and things like that. And I think, I mean, I'm very lucky to work with David, your brother, and he sends me stuff all, middle of the night, I wake up and see a text message, oh, this is a picture of your building from 19 whatever.
right.
And I go, oh, this is amazing. But I think if people knew what it looked like or what it could be, I think they need to be educated. And I think a lot of people don't know how to go find that or where to go do that. So I think if that would be very helpful to that.
In this day and age, if you could not only have the availability via text, but make a YouTube video, seriously.
The book you just mentioned, I'm pulling it up, and it's painful to go through right now. I'm trying to be organized and, go through it. But I bet if someone owned one of these homes and they don't know that, I think this could be a useful thing to say, this is what it could look like someday, or did look like back in the day.
Absolutely.
Totally worth it.
And what staff has been putting together is a digital view into some of that, and hopefully we'll have that up and running at some point. It's it's not staff's delays, it's our ability to clean up the data.
Yeah, the other big thing with that book is that it was pre-E91 street addresses and that the town had been rezoned, so none of the zoning plats line up, and so the GIS is going to be an incredible improvement, because now all of a sudden we'll have real street addresses and current plat and lots to go with everything. And we did hire an intern from URI a year and a half or 2 years ago who worked with Carol and has created the skeleton for a whole GIS story map kind of setup for the historic properties throughout town. And for those of you who don't know, there are like 6 national register districts in town. We only ever talk about Kingston, but there is a lot more going on in town from a historic perspective.
And not regulated, right, but they're still historic
They
districts.
exist, yeah.
Yeah.
Excellent.
I'll share one more thing if I can find it quickly. I know Murray hasn't even seen this yet.
And while he's doing that, one of the other thing that is an accomplishment that you may or may not have heard of was the work being done in Matunic. So looking at historic resources that are subject to sea level rise, we had received a grant through the CLG Certified Local Government Grant Program. So we had a professional historic preservation individual come in and resurvey a lot of these properties that are subject to sea level rise, and a couple opportunities to get in front of the public to tell them about, these are some things that you could be doing to address any concerns that you have.
Come on.
That's really, really good. Forward thinking.
The image is just not wanting to come up.
And I think as Joe said, one of the key factors in attracting and retaining members is having the ability to make a list, accomplish things, have some positive action. That makes a difference.
I agree,
So
yeah.
you folks just need to promote to a greater degree all the good work you're doing as well.
If we were able to get, this is almost like what comes first, the education that we want to be doing that requires more people to get it going would bring in people, and it would get us out there. So how do we get to that point first so that we can actually get the momentum?
Have you coordinated with URI at all in the appropriate departments?
Yeah, in fact, it's one of our action items is to have that type of coordination, and one of our outgoing board members who's affiliated with URI has, both for that Matunic project, we've had some URI involvement. So yes, we have tried to pull in URI where possible.
And I believe Roger Williams has a historic preservation degree, so that might be another source of not necessarily board members, but just assistants and outreach and so on.
Yeah, I think we've reached out to them at different points. Mr. Robbins, I'm forgetting his name, but one of the historic preservation guys that's principal there.
So I put up on the screen, we have a consultant that we hired with a certified local government grant to reevaluate historic resources in Matunic, because they haven't been evaluated since 1984. And the idea is to evaluate their exposure to climate change and sea level rise. So the stars on the map are the resources that were identified through his survey, and just last week before Carol left, I had her do a quick and dirty map against 1, 3, and 7 year sea level rise. So this is 100-year storm events, 1, 3, 5, and 7 foot sea level rises for a 100-year storm. And our hope is, once we've identified these things, there are Department of Interior resources available for resiliency grants to protect historic resources that we can make these people aware of.
That's great. And of course, this is probably not a layer contained within the storm tools maps.
Well, that's where the sea level rise information comes
Right,
from,
but
but
the
the locations
adding
of the individual
yeah.
properties, no.
Any other comments or questions? Thank you very much. Keep us posted on your work.
Will do.
Feel free to come back as well.
Sounds good. Thanks for having us.
Thanks.
Sorry.
We know what you meant, yeah. Next item is next steps for Old Tower Hill Road. Jamie?
Again, Madam Chair, just quick update. We're working internally on how we can potentially amend the contract with Able City East to dive deeper in the regulatory and design guidelines associated with Old Tower Hill. Hopefully we'll have something wrapped up shortly on that, but that is our next step for them. And then as we refine that, we'll come back before the planning board. As part of that setup, we're looking at how many potential outreach programs we can do, potentially with one or more property owners, or offer them the opportunity to participate, or we can just take their property and redesign it and dive a little bit deeper into how it can be revitalized and density can be increased. So again, those are our next targets.
Do you have a time frame for that? Because I know the council, it indicated in a previous meeting that they were supportive of amending the contract. I know it's probably getting the nuts and bolts.
Again,
of
it's
it.
on my desk, but this week is potential amendments to the STIP that are due this Friday. So things get prioritized, and that is my priority this week.
All right, thank you, Jamie. Planning board liaison activities, affordable housing?
Joe?
I said I might rely a little on Brian to fill in a little bit, but we did get 3 additional members, so we have a full slate, so that is good. I think there was 2 meetings since the last time we talked here, one of which I attended, one of which I was not able to attend. Their discussions were primarily on what they were going to brief the town council with, and also bringing the new members up to speed.
And
We always scold everybody else. Thanks, Brian. The town council did vote last night to or through consensus, agree to have a special meeting on April 24th. It's a Thursday. That'll be a work session, again, with Union Studios on the 3 municipal properties associated with the town's affordable housing initiative. So if you can jot that down, we'll send reminders out, but April 24th, fourth Thursday of the month
Is
in
that,
April.
is that a work session with us, or just a public meeting at which everyone
Public
is invited?
meeting that you can attend,
I see.
primarily a work session between consultant and town council.
Okay. Legislative update.
Ongoing, Andy? Changing daily?
Yeah, I'm working my way through the 12 bills, about 150 pages worth, because they overlap. Every time someone's changing a definition, suddenly you've got another 20-page bill, because there's 20 pages of definitions. But it's all too early to say this is all House stuff from Shekarchi. Because it's from Shekarchi, it will probably pass the House in some form or another. But who knows what will happen at the Senate. Some of the stuff is good. 5794 is the comprehensive change to the zoning and the subdivision statutes, and some of the stuff is really good. I'm proud to brag that they did put most of the stuff that I wanted to get on adaptive reuse into it. So I think it's more useful now and has some safeguards, such as the requirement that there be at least 10% affordable housing on an adaptive reuse if it's more than 4 units, which previous to this there wasn't. You didn't have to have any at all. So, and some safeguards for industrial structures. They picked and chose some things. The town will have to do some more stuff to specifically define the industrial areas that we want to protect for health and safety reasons, but that will help protect those industrial areas and other industrial structures. They at least have a year vacancy before someone can convert them, so there's some protection. Ironically enough, I had limited that just to 1 or 1.5 story buildings, because I thought, you know, the mills we know are functionally obsolete for manufacturing, but they applied it to everything. And the time, originally I thought 5 years, then the Senate bill that never got anywhere had said 3 years, so I thought 3 years, and they cut it to 1, but like I said, we got some stuff. We got master plan back, but only at the request of the developer. So, and then there's all these other bills that have a mixture. I mean, the whole general thing is increased density and requiring more zones that have, you know, 2-family dwellings at least. And who knows where any of that stuff's gonna go.
Thanks, Andy. And then I did want to mention, Jamie sent out an email to everyone yesterday or the day before about a training that statewide planning is doing. It's in March. I don't remember the date, but... There's 2. One's HTC, right? Or are they both?
No, they're both, one is the 3-hour training. And that's the introduction, which I think everybody here has. But there's also, you need an hour update, and that is going to be, I think...
That's during the day, though.
Yeah, it's a noontime thing, so it's nice. I'm just looking to see, I thought it was a Wednesday. Is it the 19th? No? Yeah, it's 12:30. It's 12:30 to 1:30 on Wednesday, March 19th. So it's St. Joseph's Day. So, but yeah, they, in doing the surveying, they found that people, you know, this is a way you don't have to take time at night if you're out a lot of nights. So that 1 hour update is being given then. They are definitely hoping to do another historic preservation one, specifically, but probably that won't be till the fall.
Sounds good, thank you. Would someone like to make a motion to adjourn? Was waiting. Motion from Peter, second. Liz? Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Nays? Motion carries. Thanks, everyone.